There it is. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is El Fuego History. We're just going to try a new name each week, see which group of Minifans pisses off the most, and then we're just going to stick with that, I think, for the rest of the time. So, it's going to be a niche show, I think. It's going to be for the hardcore history fans out there, like myself, KDL, Kirk's Death List, one of the lesser-known accounts, joined by a few...
Making your debut, I believe?
Making my YouTube debut. That's right.
You and Austin?
That's right, yep.
That's right, Austin, too.
Welcome to the YouTube.
Another lesser-known guy, Austin from New London, joined by two legends of the game, R.A. Menahan and Ned Snark.
Yeah. Well, this came about because of a fascinating tailgate discussion pre-show in Saco on Saturday, and we all found some very strong common interests. And of course, R.A. and I are drinking buddies, not champs, although you did make it to the finals against Kirk, R.A. in one round, and we've both been knocked out of the matches. But I think we do hold the record for 18 combined correct answers.
Yeah. You got eight right.
I got 8 right. You got 10 right. So when my loss was not due to LK getting drunk or drinking 10 beers, it was because you got to 10 faster.
Yeah, and of course, it's not the quantum Chris approach, which is just,
that's right.
More of attrition with him.
It was more of a yes, exactly. And to this day, I still can't get over the fact that Canberra, not Victoria, is the capital of Australia. But I'll have to live with that. So we just found like we had some really common interests, and especially regarding history, and we just started talking about it almost to the point where we could have run up to the showtime and still been having this conversation.
No, we did. We were told to get in the car.
That's true. You're right.
We were like inching away from each other, going toward our vehicles while the screen was essentially on. Yeah.
So we came up with the idea of doing a history show, El Fuego History, on the KMS YouTube channel for a very niche audience, as KDL said. So we had Austin from who I just met from on Saturday from New London, and we could an RA. So we all have very strong backgrounds. Oh, New London? Is it really?
Dr. Sheffield's, yep.
Yeah.
A new Red Sox sponsor right here.
Yes.
But
Austin's teeth are white though, so
my dad's a dentist, so
it must be in the water.
Your
dad's a dentist?
Yeah.
Must be in the water. I think it should be fun. We're going to start with the French Revolution, and then any topics anyone that watches this would like to discuss, like to hear us talk about a little bit. I mean, I'm sure we're all game for that. But off the top, especially Ned and RA, you guys have been doing this for a long time. Obviously, we all saw the tweets from Kirk Monday. I guess right off the bat, my biggest takeaway was the fact that he was, did two great live shows in soccer. We were at one of them on Saturday, and then, Sunday also, after he was feeling, down's not even a strong enough word, really in a rough spot. So that really sticks out to me as being real impressive. RA, I heard you on the OG Menafan show last night. I thought that was really good. Ned, you won't like this. I thought Jerry Callahan did a good job discussing it yesterday. You might disagree, but I thought he did a good job discussing it on his podcast. And then, Mike did a good job on Go for Gary today. I heard a little bit of that at the beginning. So just any thoughts, guys? I mean, I don't really have much else to say on the topic that other people haven't said. So.
No, kind of going off what you were saying, KDL. That was a testament to how much he cares about the fans. Mm-hmm. That he was in that dark of a spot where his tweet said on Sunday he was almost going to take action, that he still went out and did it for the fans. Mm-hmm. So I think that it speaks volumes, and I can't even imagine, and we can't really speculate on what's going on, but you can only hope for the best.
Austin.
I agree with RA. I mean, it shows his true dedication to all the fans, and I hope he gets better. I hope he gets the care he needs, and that he takes his time and he comes back when he's ready, so that he can keep doing the show for good. And I hate that he feels this way all the time, and if he can get the care he needs, that he can stop this more or less, that'd be great. So I just hope he gets better.
Yeah. It's just a testament to his professionalism too. As everyone said, it happened on his event was on Sunday, and then he continued to go ahead and push through it and do the show for the fans. And the expectation was, we now know, listening to the Sunday show, the amazing pressure that he was under But you wouldn't have known if he had said on Monday he felt that way, but he said on Sunday. So it was really just an amazing performance, 2-day performance. We deeply appreciate it. Take as long as you want, come back if you want, but just take care of yourself and your family. And we want him around for a long time in whatever form he wants to take. So,
yep. Well said, definitely. All right. So with that being said, I guess we'll get to the point of the show. So as I said, we're going to discuss French Revolution. I'll go over some brief background. Ned, I think you'll follow up a little bit on that, and then we're going to do kind of a compare and contrast to today. So obviously, there's not people getting guillotined in the streets today in the U.S., but there are some similarities and differences. It's, I think, a very interesting time to be alive today, and I think the French Revolution was very interesting and confusing and polarizing time as well. So I think there's definitely some comparisons and some similarities, differences that we can talk about, throughout. So I guess right off the bat, French Revolution really ties all the way back to the Enlightenment era, without getting, putting on my history voice and watching everyone else kind of fall asleep. It gets into the Enlightenment era, which starts throughout the 1600s, really takes off in Paris. Like, Paris is the center of the Enlightenment. You think about a century later in the late 1700s with America. They take Enlightenment ideas, a lot of them from French philosophers, French thinkers, and apply that to the American Revolution, and then to what we know of with the Constitution, and other decrees, documents that were stated in the making of the United States. So that happens in 1776 through the mid to late 1780s, and then the French Revolution will pick up pretty much right after that. So the French see this this revolution, and I'm not going to call it peaceful with the American Revolution, the war that we fought for our independence. But they see this revolution and they think they can do the same thing and improve their lives. And there are really a lot of discrepancies in France at the time.
Yep. So and just to touch on that too, around this time, after the Dutch are the first people to lend the United States money. John Adams secured a $2 million guilder loan from the Dutch to help fund the revolution. But of course, it was Franklin and Jefferson that got the French to support the American Revolution, and they saw this, correctly or incorrectly, as another way to curb Great Britain's growing power on the seas and foreign colonization projects. So they had just come out of the 7 Years' War, which we refer to as the French and Indian War in the U.S., but it was a continental European war that was very costly with Prussia and England and Sweden and France. So they were for the first time, very broke, heavy on debt. The tax system was a complete disaster. The three classes of people were the nobles and the clergy and the people, and the nobles and the clergy could tax the people, the peasants, almost as they saw fit, unrelentingly, for anything. I mean, you can't make it up. A salt tax, a child tax, a head tax. I mean, they had all sorts of ridiculous taxes that just worked these people to the bone. Window taxes, exactly. And it became, the have and the have-nots. And talk about the 1%. It was even less than 1%. You had 24 million French peasants, and you maybe had less than half a million clergy and nobles. So the country began to run out of money. But they did have the part of the elite, and the nobility, or the enlightened people that were writing at the philosophical level, not for the peasants, but they began to kind of open the eyes and minds of the lower nobility, not the ones close to the king. And of course, that kind of see that the world doesn't have to be like this. Do we need an absolute monarch? Who is God to tell us that this man is entitled to rule us? And unfortunately, though, there was not prosperous times. So it was kind of a perfect storm of unfair taxation, a huge, overwhelmed, unhappy population. Then you had some natural disasters too. You had a couple of years in the late 1770s or 1780s actually, where droughts and floods and bad crops, people were now starving. And you had a weak king and who had an unpopular queen. So the recipe was there for strife internally.
Right. And just to go on, sorry, I just wanted to put some numbers on that. Over 90% of the French population made up, you touched the third estate, the peasants, basically. So the first estate were the clergy, members of the church. Second estate's the nobles, basically wealthy landowners. And then the third estate, again, over 90% of the population were these were the same people that were getting taxed and having to actually deal with the floods and the famine that was going on. While at the same time, they looked and they saw the nobles and the clergy, living high on the hog, basically,
right.
Still having their extravagant, almost medieval style parties, very outdated economic system at the time. All those things definitely came together and led to the French Revolution.
Yeah.
So with those causes, do you guys see anything that will parallel today with the Black Lives Matter movement? You got wealth inequality. Do you guys see any, we just kind of did a real brief summary. You guys see anything that looks similar now that it did then?
So I was going to say the first big similarity that I see is something that I've heard the coronavirus be called is the Great Accelerator. And I see that this kind of same situation going on with the French Revolution with the bad harvest. So there was a tremendous amount of unrest with taxation and just wealth inequality in the nation, but they were also starving, and that just bred, it led to the revolution. It was this spark, and I see that going on with the coronavirus right now. Nobody was working. People are suffering. They're all on unemployment, and so they're using this time to start rioting or protesting things that they see matter. The George Floyd death, was the spark that started everything. So that's the first parallel that I kind of see going on.
How about you, Ned?
You can absolutely look at it that way as well, but I do think that we have a bit, and I'm not going to go down far the rabbit hole, but there is a bit of a financial unfairness to the tax system, and we can have that whole separate discussion. But there does seem to be more people pay more than their fair share as opposed to others, and those others seem to be at the top. And when you see, and if you want to count entities as individuals, when you see Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, Apple paying no or very little taxes and actively avoiding paying taxes by setting up in other countries, that's not right. And even as a pure capitalist as I am, a free market capitalist as I am, it's your right to avoid paying taxes, but it's against the law not to pay them. So we need to close those loopholes, but it's not being done right now.
I know. I think the big thing from my perspective, at least from my take, is going to be the wealth inequality. Like you were saying about the corporations and the billionaires. I did some research earlier. The 3 richest people on the planet have made $130 billion since March. In the middle of
since March.
Wow. 130. Jeff Bezos was at a low of $105 billion. The poor guy. In March, and right now he's worth $178 billion. So he has made $73 billion while 17 million people are unemployed. So I think there's stuff like that. You got the first estate, the second estate. You got the peasantry, who's we'll call them the 99%. There's a 99, the 1%ers that everyone talks about. It's a little skewed. It's more. I think it's more like 40% of the wealth is held by 10% of the population. But you can definitely draw parallels that if what Austin was saying with the George Floyd stuff, got that. You've already got Black Lives Matters going on. Now you've got people trying to get on wealth inequality. I think you could see something come of it. Obviously not the guillotine, but with the election coming up, I think you would be hard pressed to think that something could not happen. Yeah. What do you got, KDL?
Yeah, well, just going off that point real quick, you can look at Portland right now too.
Yeah.
What's going on with Portland with the federal courthouse there, and the protests. They start as protests. It seems like it repeats itself every single day, and then it evolves into something that's definitely something that I don't think the First Amendment protects necessarily in terms of the right to peacefully assemble.
That's correct.
So I like the term Austin used about kind of an accelerant, and I looked at it as social media kind of being the accelerant.
Yeah.
And the reason I say it is at least in the United States. Right. Yeah. So at least in the United States, the economy was doing very well. You can't say everyone was prospering, but all the numbers bear out that the United States and most of the rest of the world was trending in the right direction.
Correct.
Coronavirus lockdown, obviously, the economy goes to shit, for lack of a better word, and you see a lot of more social media interaction, engagement during the time. But at the same time, you look back at the French Revolution, that was over years, right? You had years of famine and droughts and unfair taxes. We're talking about a matter of months where, everything went from, pretty positive to not so positive, in many different parts of the country. So I think social media is a big part of that because if we weren't as connected as we are.
That's a great point.
I think everything wouldn't be as widespread, or at least it wouldn't spread as much. And again, there's good things that come out of that in terms of the initial reaction to George Floyd and the peaceful protests and call for change that came from it, at least in my opinion. But what it's evolved into is something different. I don't think that evolution would have taken place nearly as quickly if it wasn't for something like social media.
Yeah, and there was no free press in pre-revolutionary France. So you either had letters from family living in Paris or the major cities to their relations in the country. That's how they got their news. Or they had illegal gazettes, that were being published by underground, like we'd call today, underground newspapers to get the word out. So the government was also trying to stop that. So there really wasn't. It was really like a word of mouth. And something else I read in more detail today was the French Revolution was really centered in Paris, and many of the provinces outside of Paris were still very religious, very conservative, and got along well with both the clergy and their nobles. So it seemed to be more of a city-led revolution that spread out eventually over time.
Because that's how a lot of them happened. You look at the Russian Revolution; it was basically just Leningrad.
Yes, it was.
I'm listening to a podcast right now called Hardcore History. I highly recommend it. It gets
you mentioned that Saturday.
Talking about it.
Yep.
And but yeah, he right now on the 6th episode, and he's going over the Russian Revolution and how it was just a bunch of protesters in Leningrad, and then the Germans got Lenin just to kind of go in and stir shit up. Yep. But it is a lot of the time just like it is a minority of the people who overthrow the status quo pretty much, and then the rest of everyone else has to adapt to it.
Right.
But I do like what KDL was saying about how with social media and how that is, I'd say that's more of an accelerant than COVID, but COVID in a way. But it condenses everything to the point where you can get information like that, like instantaneously.
Yeah.
So opinions are swayed, and people's emotions get tied up over a shorter period of time. So I actually like that point an awful lot.
Yeah.
Right, and you can talk about how a movement gets radicalized. I know we'll get into that a little bit in a couple minutes, but I find the reaction, or at least the extended reaction of the George Floyd case a little curious, at least just because I think it was a great example of an incident or a video that everyone, regardless of where you are politically or socially, everyone was kind of on the same page. Like, I was an asshole. Like, he deserves to be in jail. He should get, convicted of, what's it? I think second-degree murder they're looking for.
Charged with second-degree murder.
So everyone was in agreement, and again, the initial response was overall good. Again, obviously, Minneapolis started burning pretty soon thereafter, but I just think I'm surprised that something like that was so universally kind of accepted becomes so polarizing so quickly, and I think that kind of turns some people off when they see something like what's going on in Portland still today. Whereas 2 months ago, you poll, I'd say 80-90+% of America would agree that that there should be maybe some police reform after that happened. Sure. And now I feel if you ask people, it might be less because of what's continued to happen in places like Portland.
Well, it spiraled with the French Revolution, at least the first wave to the Bastille. They wanted reform from the king. Nobody at that point, I don't think, was talking about overthrowing the Bourbon dynasty. But they were definitely
the Jacobins who came in a little later.
That
was their radical platform, was to get rid of the nobles.
Correct. Correct. So I'm seeing some parallels too with police brutality and police reform needed to now it's evolved in the short time, really not that long, to this movement that's gone well beyond police brutality, where now we're talking and racial inequality. And the same thing could be said, although if I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the French Revolution, when the assembly first started, it was the people, they weren't allowed into the convention of the king called.
Oh yeah, they locked
Eventually
them out.
they locked him out, and I was like,
yeah.
okay, we're gonna go down to the tennis court and find that building and
the
meet on our own.
Yeah, tennis court oath it was called.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was again just at demanding more rights to the people. Like, why are you small elite telling us how to live and what to do?
Yep.
And that just evolved. Again, it was also mishandled too, right? I mean, why did the idiots just start paying more taxes? And they could have kind of resolved this whole taken it right out,
And so just a real brief on what you were just talking about. You had the National Assembly in France, which basically was essentially like Parliament. I think kind of like a Parliament for Great Britain at the time was a limited monarchy. The difference is in France it was an absolute monarchy. So yes, there's National Assembly, and there's something that was essentially the National Assembly before the National Assembly.
It's general.
But the king yes, thank you.
Yeah.
But the king just didn't listen to him. He just did his own thing. So he had these people from the different estates, and he didn't listen. So you mentioned the tennis court oath, and basically they leave and they come up with the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens. Sound familiar?
Yep. Heavily edited by Thomas Jefferson too, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Basically, people could enjoy the rights to liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. That was their big thing. So from there, you have reforms called to turn into a limited monarchy. Again, give National Assembly power, essentially like Parliament, power of the purse, basically allowing them to levy taxes more fairly, that sort of thing. And the nobles basically turn it down.
Yeah,
the nobles basically say no, we don't agree to a limited monarchy. And in return, that's where you lead into more of the radical phase. And like, all right, well, if you're not going to do that, we're basically we want a republic now. So that's where, Ned, to your point, talking about the radicalization, that's where you see that happen, is they were calling for something that was a lot less really than what the American Revolution was, but it turns into something that, becomes more and more radical because both sides start to become, more and more entrenched in their views and what they want.
Correct.
So with the we jump ahead with Robespierre, we talked about the Jacobins and how they were the radicals who wanted to get rid of the monarchy. Do you guys see anyone in government right now or in Southern America right now playing that role as like the radical who will, not saying that they're going to get guillotined at the end of it by their own movement, but is there someone who you think could ignite this spark in this powder keg, so to speak? KDL.
Well, I was going to let you go first. All right, I thought you had the.
I had AOC.
Yeah,
I think AOC is the most polarizing person in politics right now. She's young. She's got, depending on how you look at her, she's got very, very extremist views on public education. On this, she's basically just a socialist. But when you look at the cost of healthcare, like everyone, I read today that they were I was doing research for this, that people spend $10,000 on average in healthcare. Would you pay that in taxes if we were to have socialized medicine? I don't know. But I think if anyone were to lead a revolution, I think Bernie's too old. But I bet you AOC would be able to.
But Bernie started it though. Bernie was the guy that kind of got the ball rolling. He's going to be the guy that gets out before. He's
Marx. He's Marx, and then AOC will be Lenin, and then someone after AOC will be Stalin.
Correct.
That's just exactly how it works.
Exactly. And then we'll be pulling down Bernie's statue. Our grandchildren will be pulling down Bernie's statue in like 50 years or something.
Yes, because he was too whatever. Yes. Right.
Yeah. But how about you, Austin? Let's hear from you.
Someone that I think she's not in politics, but the author of White Fragility, Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah.
Like the spark to all of this unrest that's going on right now.
Was that the one on Ria and Fran's reading list, by the way? Is that the?
Mike said he read it he was his professor or something like that, or at Westfield State.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
I have not read it, but
no.
I've read part of it. Yeah.
How is it, Ned?
If you disagree with it, you're a racist. Basically, every argument against it it's written very cleverly so that each argument is there's no argument. If there's any dissent with the author's opinion, then it's because of your racism.
All very
reader's racism.
It'll all come back to being racist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you think she is that big of an influence?
I think she's becoming a larger and larger influence. More so because not only so she wrote this book, which is a New York Times bestseller, but she's also a consultant for companies. They'll literally bring her in as like a diversity consultant to talk about her whole shtick. And if she can get the large corporations to start thinking like this as well, I think it's not that far of a slope that we get into just more chaos.
Correct.
How about you,
Correct.
Nick? What do you got?
You caught me off guard on this one because I hadn't really thought of someone. I was actually more thinking of. I was actually more thinking of entities like media as a whole, like the and institutions, whether it's education. I didn't really, but you're right though that we should identify, or you can identify. I'll just think about it more. But I was thinking of this all started way back in the '60s with the radicalization of the education system, and I kind of missed it because in college some of my courses were more liberal leaning, but it was clear it was liberal leaning, and you could actually have open debates and debate with the professors. But even my children now, who are all graduated college, say, no, it's a radicalization process in almost all of your classes, except for what we would call the absolutes, the science, the mathematics. But now they say that's changed.
Even those are changing now. They're teaching like ethnomathematics. Like you have to teach math in a different way to minorities because I think like Hispanics and Blacks typically score worse on math and science exams. So you have to teach a completely different way to make it more equal. Even though it's a concrete subject. So I don't get it. That's very odd, right? Yeah.
That's like that maybe matches up with the what was the calendar that was introduced during the French Revolution? They did away with all the religious calendar.
Yeah,
the month of thermal.
They made
that's a good comparison right there.
It was insane.
Napoleon got rid of that in about 2 seconds after taking power.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be interested to see how this turns out. How about KDO? Who do you got?
Yeah, so I definitely like the systems you were talking about, Ned, with education and media as a whole. I think Austin and I are both semi-recent college graduates, and we definitely saw it at a large public university where I think we're both for younger guys definitely more down the middle. Might even be viewed as more conservative than other people our age. And there are times where we're not talking about crazy radicalized opinions that we have, but there are times where maybe it was a discussion on socialism in a poli-sci class or something, and we'd be a little hesitant to, if not more so than a little, to speak out and say, I don't know if socialism is such a good idea, because for fear of an effect. And I think you see the same thing in politics now with people. Some people that are afraid to say they're Trump supporters. I think you saw it in the polls leading up to the 2016 election. I think that was a large part of it. You have something to jump in with that, Austin?
Oh, I was going to say, I was a political science major in college, and I did not raise my voice very often because you could tell the people who were much more left-leaning controlled the conversation, but not only did they control the conversation, but they were much more emotionally charged with it. So if you jumped in with a counter view, they would attack you personally and much more viciously than it was just like, okay, we're having a conversation here. I'm just stating my opinion. It was, I'd be tentative to say my ideas in those classes.
And I think too, if you want to compare and contrast up to the Reign of Terror, because once they crossed the line to the Reign of Terror in 1794 with Robespierre, you could still have those discussions in France, although they were getting more vicious and violent. But you still had the Directory that evolved. You still had moderates, and then you had radicals, right? And eventually, the radicals destroyed and tried and threw them all in jail. So I can easily, what I noticed about it and reading through it previously and rereading it today, and what I'm seeing is this leftism today, and even the radicalism of the French Revolution is almost a religion. It's like there's a religious fervor to it that you see in fundamental religions, whether it's Christian, Judaism, or Islam, or Hindu. There's a definite religious aspect to it, like they are true believers, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to shout you down. You don't have a right to speak or dissent, even though the Constitution guarantees that. Right. And I was seeing that both waves of it have had this religiosity to it, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say you can say the same thing about communism too. I mean, thinking that in Soviet Russia after 1919, you had the everyone called each other comrade, for example. Like even something as simple as that's basically creating a club, and if you don't do it, you're looked down upon.
Yeah.
And French, it was citizen. Remember, everyone was citizen.
That's right. Yeah. They were, yep. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just thought of one, Ari, real quick for the person you're asking for. I like Jack, the head of Twitter.
Yeah.
I could see him, allowing take cancel culture, for example, allowing that to continue, and eventually it's going to spin around and it's going to be pointed right back at you at some point. So I can see Jack. Twitter itself eating itself from the inside out.
Yesterday, Twitter took down that video that Trump retweeted of what was the White Coat Summit at the Capitol building.
Yep. Yeah, doctors.
Yeah, it was doctors talking about what they think of the treatments for COVID.
I missed that. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. You missed it because they took it down on every platform: Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. They all took it down within like 10 hours of it.
But why? What was the reason?
Because the doctors were saying that hydroxychloroquine, Zithromax, and zinc taken on like a regimen can help prevent and help cure COVID-19. But
unreal.
Yeah, so there's some studies.
Jack knows more than doctors. That's all you have to know.
Yeah.
Twitter.
But the other doctors are okay to listen to. The ones that are saying, stay inside and don't do anything.
Those ones are
hide under your bed, all that. The doctors are saying that are totally okay to listen to. But any other,
So it's being politicized.
It's being politicized, but they're stating studies that were done by like the World Health Organization, which is not an American organization. So it's like, I think World Health Organization is based in France, which is ironic because we're talking about the French Revolution. But it's like France is dictating policy in the United States if that's what the studies are being based off of. So
but I've been taking every time you get a cold, I get those. What is it? Those zinc tablets. What is it called? They're over the counter. I take those every time I feel a cold coming on, and it works. You put them under your tongue, they dissolve. Yeah, they like what the hell is it called?
I take these. That's
you take cold. What?
There's like COLDEEZ. Like
is it like airborne?
It's a zinc.
No,
it's not airborne.
No, the one I take is it's not called zinc, but it's like zincoid or zinc, and it's put it under your tongue, let it dissolve under your tongue, and when you feel a cold coming on, and sometimes it stops it dead, and other times it definitely lessens the impact. It definitely shortens the life, and I drink a lot of quinine water with my vodka. Vodka and tonic. Right. Well, yeah, I mean, was it? I thought of this too, even though it's off subject, but I think someone else has said it too. But the British conquered the world through colonization by fighting off malaria and viruses by drinking quinine, and it's a known preventive. Absolutely, it's malaria, yellow fever, dengue fever, all the like the mosquito-borne illnesses. Oh, quinine is what stopped it initially in the beginning. So, but I also see the media just to touch back. The media is trying to score points, viewers, money by getting eyes on their station or their network by trying to stay ahead of the radicalization. But eventually, it's going to get around them, and they're going to get swept away as well. And suddenly they're not going to be radical enough for the radical, and they're going to say, "But we've been here since the beginning, supporting you," and they're not going to care. Just like the communists did that in Russia, they did it in Cuba. The initial supporters, after a while, weren't very supportive, or weren't as supportive as they thought they should be, and they were like usually executed, right?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens when the blue check marks turn on each other.
Yeah.
But
and you still see that now. You see that there's a race. I think there's also kind of a race to be the biggest victimization.
100%.
And I mean, there's no discussion that Native Americans have probably been victimized more than any other subgroup in the United States. And you just see like it's just like it wasn't like this before. Everyone you try to work against being a victim. Like you wanted to put that behind you. But it's going to be a process, just like the French Revolution was.
That's a good one to end on. So.
Yeah, leave it. Yeah, wise words from Ned. We'll close with that every week. I think it's a losing segment. I think.
All right. Any closing thoughts, fellas?
I mean, I guess I had a lot of fun doing this. I mean, we could.
Yeah.
I had my I had PowerPoints pulled up. We can go through slide by slide if you want. Maybe do that.
We can share the screen.
Yeah. Share. Next time I'll just share it. You guys can sit back. I'll do a little lecture, and that'll be it.
That'd be great.
But no, I enjoyed it. I think we get a little off topic at times, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think we talk about
it evolves because that's the point of having the discussion.
Yeah,
is that
exactly.
we can
really wherever it takes us, and then we'll move on to the next point. So I enjoyed that, and I learned a little bit myself, and I hope it was somewhat entertaining for watching.
But all right, we got to tell KDL though, as the host, it's his job to keep us in line. So if we start veering off track, he's got the private chat. He can just say, shut the fuck up and get back on topic.
Well, see,
your mistake would veer back.
Right. So your mistake with naming me the host is I'll go off the rails the most out of maybe anyone here. So that was a mistake on I accept no responsibility in that at all whatsoever.
Okay.
All right. So I guess until next week, we'll come up with a topic and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So next week is quantum history, right?
Quantum history is next week. So.
That's with El Fuego. Next week is quantum history. Then we're going to do history at midnight.
That's history.
Go for history.
OG history.
Yep. All right. Until then.
Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you.